Well. So student loans get turned down. Feel me? Affirmative action get turned down. Shit, after a while, they gonna repeal that 14th, 15th, 16th Amendment too on y'all ass. You know what I'm saying? Shit, they'll have us back on the plantation. You know what I'm saying? You'll have people saying, as a black person, I don't think it's that bad to got us back on the plantation because I can prove I can work hard. You know what I'm saying? You'll have folks being like, shit, as a Latino person, I don't care that you back down the 15th Amendment because shit, I don't need to be a citizen to be able to vote. You're gonna have those type of minorities that love to tokenize their minority ship to be able to justify some type of shit the conservatives are doing. And you know what I'm saying? At this point, I ain't even surprised. You feel me? 2 + 2 is 4. The sky's blue. Dogs bark. And suckers do sucker shit. See what I'm saying? The individuals that want to tap dance and, you feel me, be supremacists or white sympathizers, they're going to always do that. They're going to be sympathies of white supremacists. You see what I'm saying? Because it pays. You know what I mean? You're going to have individuals that think of all of the most craziest ways to talk about affirmative action while they single-handedly, while they ignore, hey, white people built this country. No.
The Supreme Court has ruled that affirmative action is a violation of the 14th Amendment and therefore unconstitutional. The majority opinion was penned by Justice Roberts, and it goes through the judicial history of striking down race-based state actions. Starting with Brown versus Board of Education, which declared that the right to a public education must be made available to all on equal terms. And then they discussed ending segregation in busing, bathhouses, public beaches, golf courses, neighborhoods, and then marriage in Loving versus Virginia, because as the court said in this opinion, the 14th Amendment proscribes all invidious racial discriminations. Invidious, meaning unfair, unjust, unpleasant. And then the court said that any race-based decisions must survive strict scrutiny, meaning that the government has a compelling interest, and then the action is narrowly tailored to achieve that interest. In plain language, what the Supreme Court said is that being intentional about achieving diversity in our colleges and universities is offensive. Let me get more concrete than that. A medical school trying to ensure that more black doctors graduate, especially in the wake of high rates of black maternal and infant mortality, high rates of racist healthcare practices. They said that is as bad as not letting black people ride the same buses as white people. The Supreme Court has said that getting more black and brown teachers, lawyers, and psychologists in those fields is as bad as banning interracial marriage. They have compared getting minorities into college at higher rates, but still lower rates than white legacies, to segregation. They have said that the government does not have a compelling enough interest to right decades of wrongs by giving minority students a nudge in the lobby when everybody else is already at the penthouse. As a matter of fact, this opinion stressed that no matter how compelling affirmative action might be, it's dangerous. They used that word, dangerous, to describe ensuring that minorities are educated. The court said that 20 years later, no end of affirmative action is in sight, but rather than acknowledge that as an indication of the long road ahead to undo decades of racial injustice, the court determined that affirmative action is invidious. I'm a black lawyer. Fewer than 5% of lawyers in this country are black. White men are overwhelmingly represented as the people who make the laws that govern your rights, your liberty, your lives. And white women, I want you to pay attention because you were actually the group most benefited by affirmative action. Last year, they took away your right to bodily autonomy too. You're affected too. And these white male lawmakers want you to be as uneducated, barefoot, and pregnant as the black and brown women next to you. Lack of diversity hurts all of us. And the Supreme Court's decision today will only hurt us more.
White people in the government of America since the beginning of America was based off of race-based affirmative action. The only reason why George Washington, I can get a little bit of Nigeria, you can get a little bit of South Africa, you can get a little bit of, you see what I'm saying? That's what they doing, right? So the peep game. No, rewind back. The reason why Barack Obama was the first the first black president is because literally all the other presidents before him was a result of race-based affirmative action. You see what I'm saying? The reason why you want to talk about founding fathers was because of race-based affirmative action. You see what I'm saying? Hey, peep game. The only reason why Ketanji Brown Jackson and Clarence Thomas old punk asses up there is because of what? Race-based affirmative action. Literally, you see what I'm saying? So get into Clarence Thomas a little bit. This thing right here that I find preposterous and find funny is that for y'all that's not politically in tune, you know what I'm saying? When Clarence Thomas was being appointed to the Supreme Court, he had did some shit, right? I'm an alumni of the University of Oklahoma. And Professor Anita Hill, she was a law professor at the University of Oklahoma. And for y'all that don't know, you feel me? Clarence Thomas was trying to hit on Anita Hill. He put his pubic hairs on a soda can of hers. When Clarence Thomas was being appointed to the Supreme Court, Anita Hill came out and talked about the way in which Clarence Thomas did to her and made her feel. Do y'all know Clarence Thomas evoked that he was being lynched? Do you know that Clarence Thomas evoked all of the racial victimization he could think of when them folks was coming after him? Does it make sense that he evoked racial victimhood against a black woman because he didn't want to be held responsible for how he was sexually harassing her? Hey, peep game, peep game, peep game. When George Bush was allowing for himself to prove that he was cool with blacks, you know who he went and sought out? What I'm gonna argue, you feel me, was race-based, you feel me, affirmative action. Hey, y'all ain't got no issue when y'all want to tokenize Clarence Thomas. We don't have Clarence Thomas in the goddamn Supreme Court if George Bush wasn't trying to prove how friendly he was to black folks. Hey, if y'all haven't watched this video, Levert Bassman has an amazing video where he's able to depict the origin villain story of Clarence Thomas, man. Where you gonna be able to see that because them white folks he was around made him internalize black inferiority, now he want to take it out against black people. It wasn't black folks that was making him feel alienated at Yale. It was them white folks making him feel alienated at Yale. Somehow, instead of him having the beef against whiteness and white people, he turned it inward and said, black people I got an issue with black folks. And that's the reason why the LJ Truths, the goddamn the Wolf Hat dude, Candace Owens, the old school Topher Town Musics, the Dr. Thomas Souls, the reason why they have platforms and they're able to get this type of appeal is because they're able to speak to the psyche that white folks want to say. You see what I'm saying? Well, hey, what better to have than a black speaking head that can say everything you really want to say about black people, and you can say, hey, they said it too. Hey, look, they said it too. See what I'm saying? Clarence Thomas said that every time somebody questioned his presence at Yale because of affirmative action, and what's crazy is, when he went to Yale, they had just created policy about race-based admissions. So for me, it's given like, hey, man, he one of the type of black people that's then use all the tools and resources to his ability to benefit him personally. And now he's made it to the top of the Supreme Court. He wants to take those things away because we don't black folks don't need it. Hey, and peep game too, man, because there's something right here that I'm hearing, you feel me? But it needs more nuance because a lot of y'all be repeating speaking points. And I feel like this is the issue that I be having with all of social media. A lot of y'all to be thinking very deeply about shallow shit. And as a result, you just think you can repeat a speaking point that sound cool and cute. So then peep this game, right? You repeating that white women is the main beneficiaries of affirmative action, I can acknowledge. See what I'm saying? But it doesn't negate the way in which black people are being targeted in this race war. You see what I'm saying? When those 6 Supreme Court justices decided to deny affirmative action, they weren't doing it to spite white women. Let's get that clear. You see what I'm saying? When they talking about anti-race actions and shit like that, and they not doing it to spite white women. You feel me? Let's get that clear. When you get on your TikTok page and you go to conservative TikTok, they not celebrating the overturning of affirmative action, but to spite white women. Let's get that shit understood. You see what I'm saying? So what does this mean in terms of blackness and black people? You feel me? What does this mean in terms of being able to pick up a book in the classroom that is going to be about blackness and black people? What does it mean to have a professor or a provost or a dean or a president? And this is another one too that I think is lacking another speaking point that I believe is lacking a lot of nuance and context. Hey, listen, I wish I would have went to a HBCU. We should definitely pour more into black institutions and HBCUs. But let's not make it like the institution building of HBCUs is immune to white supremacy. Let's not act like the same system that was able to throw down affirmative action was the same system that was able to make broad, you see me, to all of the HBCUs. I want to be clear on this. If we're making a structural analysis, you get to understand how the structure in these things are interconnected and intersected. You see what I'm saying? So the same way they have Texas A&M, they gave them Prairie View A&M. It's a reason why Texas A&M is much more better funded than Prairie View A&M. You see what I'm saying? When you want to talk about University of Oklahoma and how it's taken care of compared to Langston University, let's understand the way in which they're able to use race-based admissions. You don't think that applies to a historically black university? Come on, let's talk policy. I don't give a fuck about your feelings. I don't give a fuck about what people told you. Let's talk about policy in context. You see what I'm saying? Today, Supreme Court on a 6-3 decision threw out the idea of student loan debt, being student loan forgiveness, right? So what is the relationship between student loan forgiveness and affirmative action in colleges? Can we acknowledge there is a racial context in how black people owe more money because we don't come from legacy students? A lot of our parents is not donors to the universities. A lot of our parents are not employees of the universities. As a result, we've had to do what? More student loan debt. See what I'm saying? So there's a relationship between how you was able to incentivize my black ass to experience some upward mobility by getting that degree. So you got me to take more student loan debt. So you on this line, you say, hey man, race-based, this, that, and the other is bad. Well shit, the way in which you gave me those student loans was race-based. The way in which the student loans were dispersed into facts over feelings, research over me smirch. If you got an issue with anything I'm saying, I'm really a debating ass nigga. You see what I'm saying? And I like to talk about it and show you what I'm really about. So this screen record any part you think I'm doing wrong on, sign my name in it, shit, you feel me? Address is sent to Congress League, and we can handle it. We can handle it. Education is elevation, and I believe argumentation is a great manifestation of argumentation bars. You feel me? But people ain't know. George Washington, George Bush, Samuel Adams, Quincy Adams, the other weak ass presidents that we can't think of. The only reason why they were presidents because of race-based admissions for white folks. Come on now. When we think about the way in which white people were able to create laws for the benefit of white people to spite non-white people, that's affirmative action. It's affirmative action.
So in banning colleges and universities from considering race in admissions, the Supreme Court did make an exception for military academies. And it does feel like the Supreme Court is saying that diversity does not matter in higher education, except where the United States has an interest in deciding who can fight and die for the country. And this is particularly egregious with respect to Black and Indigenous students, because ever since they've been able to, Black and Indigenous people have served the country in the military at a disproportionately high rate. So yet again, it feels like the government is telling Black and Indigenous people in particular, where it comes to how you can serve us, we'll consider race, but where it comes to making services accessible to you, we want to be colorblind.
Hey, y'all in the back, y'all peep that, huh? When it comes to being able to use the bodies of people of color, diversity and inclusion matters when it comes to higher admissions, especially in the military. But if you're trying to better yourself in your own community, we want to be colorblind and we ain't trying to hear nothing about no race. But let's go a little deeper. Legacy students, donors, employees, and special admissions, those folks is let in regardless of their merit and regardless of the racial implications. But let's think about who has the likeliness of being a legacy student or being an employee at a university. White people. Do these folks know how many white people got into schools because they daddy gave a couple $1 million and got a building named after them? Do you know they did not have the merit or the test scores or the perspective to get into a university, but they had the pocketbook? And what's the white woman from Full House that paid for her kids to go to USC regardless of their merit? Do y'all recognize when that whole little scandal happened, there was majority white kids that had their parents trying to do despicable things to get them into college admissions? And if you're an employee at a university, your child's going to be automatically admitted into it, regardless of the racial implications or merit. Hey, man, this seems like a lot of color blindness that is directly tied and targeted against, you know who. Unconsciously, I thought they talked about how the affirmative action mainly only help white women, not nobody else. And y'all folks ain't realized it yet, man. White supremacy will cut off its own leg and arm just to spite white folks. So you pointing out how it's going to impact them, it really means nothing to me because I don't give a damn. This was funny though. Clarence Thomas been seen as one of the trailblazers against this, and he was an affirmative action hire himself. As a matter of fact, he got an issue with race-based implications, but hey, when he put those pubes on a Needy Hill soda can, he ain't had no issue with evoking race and talking about he was being lynched in, did he? Oh, I got me a part two. Shout out to my boy Levert Bass, man. We gonna dive a little bit deeper into the origin villain story of the Clarence Thomas. Education is elevation and come back for more, man. When Donald Trump in 2020 was able to acknowledge that black people politically, socially, economically were dealing with all these disparities, he was acknowledging white people getting affirmative action. You feel me? When Donald Trump say, yeah, black people built this country, I don't understand why that's not about affirmative action. Why it's not about the lazy white individuals that was sitting on the plantation, you feel me, that was trying to get people to do their work. See what I'm saying? Hey, right now I just moved back to Texas. I just came back from Mexico. Right? We understand that affirmative action for white people was so pervasive in the Western world, they were able to colonize indigenous people in the name of affirmative action for white folks. And peep game, the racial resentment in the way that white people internalized hatred for each other and was able to weaponize it against non-black people, non-white people is so crazy. Think about it. White folks getting done by white folks in Europe. White folks getting done by white folks in Europe. White people are discriminating and exploiting and taking advantage of white folks in Europe. The poor whites couldn't deal with the rich whites in Europe. So you know what they did? Got their ass on some boats, came over to America and created a whole system, the way in which they was victimized. They ain't had no issue with it. They just wanted to be on top, want to make sure they ain't the person being victimized. That's the only issue they really had. You see what I'm saying? Peep game, peep game. The British, the Portuguese, the Spanish, the French, the Belgium. No, the reason why y'all came to the Western world because y'all couldn't fight for y'all own against the rich white folks. So y'all decided to literally take out y'all resentment for them and literally turn on Native Americans, turn on African people. Come on, let's really talk about the way in which the Western world is really is the. I'm gonna argue, and I think I think that I would intellectually beat the brakes off of anybody on this. The entire Western world is structured by affirmative action for European people. When y'all was running about that old horrible ass submersive, that goddamn can that no poor person of color would have did that dumb ass shit, right? People game. They had two Pakistanis, a British, an English. The whole world worried about this damn boat, about this submersible with 5 individuals in the water. The whole global community worried about it. How many Africans drowned on that boat because the Greek people didn't want to act on it? I don't want to hear shit about no all lives mattering. I don't want to hear shit about no humanity. Let's talk real. You see what I'm saying? Hey, listen, let's go back to the affirmative action shit. So when the Congress or the Supreme Court does not strike down legacy emissions, employee emissions, donation emissions, what does that say about race base? So your white daddy was able to give $5 million to get a bill named after him, and you stupid. You dumb as a box of rocks. But you know what? The university ain't tripping on you being dumb as a box of rocks. The university ain't tripping on you not having the merits to be able to get into the university because your daddy gave $5 million. You gonna tell me that has no racial implications? So the way in which we understand class in America, because folks love to say, no, it's not about race, it's about class. So you think it's ironic that the higher we go up on the economic scale, the wider and lighter it gets? You think it's ironic the lower we go on the economic scales, the darker and blacker it gets? So when Donald Trump was able to acknowledge that we need to have a platinum plus plan, right? And this platinum plus plan is supposed to be able to economically, you feel me, spur the black community. Why has he not acknowledged how affirmative action in banking, how banks literally operate off of race-based sanctions? When we is able to acknowledge, you feel me, the 1992 crime bill, and you start talking about the Democratic plantation, and you start telling me about how Joe Biden was locking up niggas, how come that's not affirmative action? How come that's not a race-based privilege within incarceration? So your ability to acknowledge the way in which I was more targeted, more policed, more incarcerated, why is that not a good example of affirmative action for white folks in prisons? Why? Why? This is really what I think right here, man. Ivy League, the entirety of Ivy Leagues in this country was really created by slave masters and colonizers. You see what I'm saying? The descendants of the colonizers and slave masters feel some type of way because they know my ancestors are turning over in their graves. How dare I be educated around this many Negroes? Back in my granddad's day, niggas only made 2% of this damn school. Now y'all make up 10%. That's too much. Letting too many of y'all in. Back in my day, Dartmouth and Yale and Harvard, they only allowed to have 3% of Negroes. Now y'all got 15%. I think that's too much. How is that not racial victimization? See what I'm saying? Hey, listen, man. Native people and black people been feeling victimized in this damn country since we've been in this motherfucker. How much legislation has been able to be birthed because black people or native people feel wronged? Not much. As a matter of fact, we see them as being hallmark type of legislation because we sensationalize it. When white folks feel victimized in this country, we get shit like this. Hey, man, in 2020, when people started feeling like wokeness was getting too crazy and wokeness was making black people too conscious about how they related to shit, white folks felt victimized. We got stop woke legislation. Hey, I think there's a potential for my white child to feel slighted. So you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna make sure we can't teach these kids about no slavery, no colonizer. Because how you gonna teach my white kid they come from a colonizer? That's bad. Hey, never mind, you don't teach them. Hey, this part here blow my mind, right? So when we teach them from the East Coast to the West Coast about the 13 original colonies and about how King George is tarring and feathering and quartering soldiers and shit like that, y'all have no issue identifying with the colonizers then. You have no issue representing that you 13 original color. You have no issue with that shit. But as soon as I start saying colonizer, all of a sudden it's bad. When you playing colonizer and Indian and you going to your little feast and shit, they got you playing cowboys and Indians and you dressing up in all these garbs and shit, you ain't got no issue by identifying with the colonizer then. But somebody on TikTok call you a colonizer and all of a sudden you mad. You mad then. You upset. I don't want to hear that shit. You see what I'm saying? To me, it's like you being able to inherit a bank and you only want the profits, not the debt. That bad shit, keep that shit. You feel me? Hey, listen, I don't want to be blamed for nothing my ancestors did, but I want to keep on everything they held. Everything they got, it's owed to me. You see what I'm saying? Imagine this, right? Imagine this, right? Let's give a metaphor. Let's give a metaphor. Most of us know who El Chapo is, right? Most of us understand who El Chapo is, understand its implications, understand how El Chapo was able to get his money, right? We understand that El Chapo was able to build an empire for his community and his family through a whole bunch of means of fucked up shit, right? What would it mean for El Chapo's kids to be like, yeah, I get the benefit from all the sales he was making, but all the beef that my daddy did and all the bad shit he did, that ain't got nothing to do with me. But I still get to live and lap a luxury for all of the pounds and all of the kilos that El Chapo was moving. That's literally how white folks move in America. You feel me? I'm proud. Hey, 4th of July next week. 4th of July is next week. It's in a couple of days. 4th of July in a couple of days. 4th of July is in a couple of days. 4th of July is more in the past than the 1860s. 1776 is literally further in the past than the 1860s, but a motherfucker gonna tell you talking about slavery, you going too far in the past. They finna pop them firecrackers though. You feel me? They finna pop them firecrackers. They finna eat they barbecue. You know what I mean? Hey, never mind that everybody wasn't free. All that matters is that white folks felt free and now we all gotta celebrate it. As a matter of fact, a lot of conservatives say, I think July the 4th is the only freedom day and Juneteenth is divisive. Hey, never mind that you were able, your ancestors were celebrating July 4th and my ancestors was preparing for it to celebrate. Feel me? Set up the festival and cleaned up. And then July the 5th, got back to work. July the 6th, got back to work. Motherfucker try to push down. Well, what do you think the Frederick Douglass would say about all this? Do you know what Frederick Douglass said about the 4th of July? Do you know what Frederick Douglass had to say about the United States of America? But Frederick Douglass was a G. Hey, listen, man. The reason why they don't want y'all to have them books in them schools is because they don't want y'all to speak the way I'm speaking to y'all right now. You know what I mean? When I say education is elevation, I'm acknowledging that the way I was able to get into them books allowed for me. You can't tell me no bullshit. You feel me? You can't just tell you can't piss on my hand and tell me it's raining. You see what I'm saying? You can't pour water on my leg and tell me it's raining. I know it's piss. You see? So you being purposely obtuse or trying to misinterpret what I got going on, that's a personal problem. I'm gonna do what I need to do regardless. And what I know is that Republicans are raging a revolution right now. It's a Republican revolution happening in the judiciary branch right now. See what I'm saying? Donald Trump was a master in being able to play chess and not checkers and able to get all of the shit on social media to make it where, hey, listen, man, he might only have 4 years. We finna fill that 4 years for a lifetime, though. I repeat that. Donnie only had 4 years in that president's office. But the way that precedents are able to be set and the way that you're able to use the policy-making system to do gatekeeping, it makes it where, you feel me, you ain't got to be present to make sure your presence is felt. I'm gonna repeat that. Donald Trump ain't got to be present in the presidency to make sure his presence is felt. We already feeling it. We already feeling it. How many federal attorneys, how many federal judges you think he was able to appoint? When you see that we got two historic 6-3 decisions. I was 6, I'm conservative. And in 4 years, how many Supreme Court justices was Donald Trump able to appoint? And for y'all that don't know, right? Supreme Court sit there their whole life, huh? Sit there, how long has Clarence been in the... I'm 32. He been there my whole life pretty much, haven't he? Come on, man. So even if you don't give a damn about politics, it still impact you. You feel me? Whether you want to talk about how raggedy your road is, how much food stamps you're getting, how much HUD you're getting, what's in your books, you feel me? How they paying teachers, you see what I'm saying? How many chemicals can be in the food that you eat? How clean is the water you're drinking? All them questions of policy, man. So you telling me you don't give a fuck about politics, it sounds dumb to me. You feel me? It sounds stupid to me. If I can acknowledge that black people are this more times likely of being convicted, this more likely times of being policed. And I recognize, hey man, the sheriff of the county, that's an elected position. You feel me? When you go to that county jail, you got to be under the jurisdiction of the sheriff. Wouldn't it make sense for me to understand and want to know who the goddamn sheriff gonna be? Hey, and peep game too, peep game. You can acknowledge the way the policy-making system work without being lost in the sauce of that one vote, one count bullshit. You see what I'm saying? You can acknowledge how bureaucracies and lobbyists and policymakers, how that all work, right? You can acknowledge that when Congress said that corporations are people and money is speech, it means that you and I broke ass being people and we not having no money but not having no speech. We can't compete for that. You see what I'm saying? Hey, listen. When that crazy white man went in Sandy Hook and shot them kids up, white kids. When this country turned a blind eye to white kids being shot with guns, because the gun lobbyists and the gun interest groups and the gun bureaucrat, they were able to make it where the policy making system is felt. So the gun industry, as a core, I'm saying, being people and they money being speech, is gonna outcompete me and you. You see what I'm saying? So this is what I know, right? I think it was like the Bacon's Rebellion, you feel me? When poor white people was trying to link up with poor black people to go at rich white people. The rich white folks masterfully figured out, you know what I'm saying, what to do. I know what to do. Feel me? If I can get you to cut off your right arm to spite the niggas over there, I hold all the arms. Matter of fact, I'm holding you by your arm. I'm going to get you to cut your other arm off to spite those black people because how dare they think they good as you? Hey, y'all notice this, that the only time you hear about the non-Ivy League schools in affirmative action is when they're talking about Abigail Fisher and the University of Texas. They ain't talking about a lot of these state institutions when it comes to affirmative action. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? Hey, man. Say, man. I just, I guess I'll read some of y'all comments now. You know what I'm saying? You know, and shout out to you, Kenya. But listen though, Harvard got caught with the bodies. Have y'all? It's a book called Ebony and Ivy. It's a book called, no, is it Ebony? It's Ebony and Ivory. Ebony and Ivy. It's by Brooks and Waters, and it's about how the entirety of the Ivy League system in this country is indebted to slavery. Not only indebted to slavery, where you literally had, well, Harvard and Dartmouth, they were literally had, they not only their own slaves, was actually going on their own slave excavations. You see what I'm saying? So when you think about the way in which affirmative action was always already to help white people, for white people, nobody had no issue with that shit. You see what I'm saying? When we talking about how, hey, Thomas Jefferson was the second president based off affirmative action. That was race-based representation in the government that literally excluded him having to deal with any other people. He only had to deal with other mediocre white folks. Let's be real, man. White mediocrity in this country is so embedded into the social fabric and make it where when individuals start feeling like that mediocrity is being called into question, they feel came for. They feel targeted or victimized. This is the thing I know right here. When I was at the University of Oklahoma, where I got all three of my degrees from, whether a white person believed my presence was there for affirmative action or not, they weren't going to outcompete me. And being real, I wasn't gonna get caught up in exhaustion trying to compete with them and prove to them my presence stuff. You see what I'm saying? If one of my University of Oklahoma classmates felt like my presence made them feel uncomfortable, that's a personal issue for them. And one thing about it though is because of how I debated, you feel me? First, I want to acknowledge I was in the top half of my class. You see what I'm saying? I was a first generation college. I was the top half of my class. So I don't want to hear, you see what I'm saying? Thomas Jefferson, on the other hand, I said Thomas Jefferson, Clarence Thomas, on the other hand, when I've learned from digging through the archive, anytime somebody talked about him in his presence, he internalized black inferiority. Think about it, man. All us millennials and Gen Xers, you feel me, and Gen Zers is dealing with affirmative action being overturned because of one black man, goddamn Clarence Thomas, figured out how to use his influence and his position in the Supreme Court to get us to overturn some shit so his inner child can heal. Come on now. Come on now. We got all these corporations in this country that was uniquely built off of exclusive practices in banking, affirmative action in banking. Shout out to you, North. I'm talking about, I'll be willing to argue 95% of business in this country is done off affirmative action for white people. When you acknowledge the ways in which banks have a high acceptance level for loans for white people, why is that not affirmative action? When we can acknowledge the legacy of redlining and how a lot of those communities that were historically redlined are still dealing with the impacts of redlining, how is that not an illustration of affirmative action for white people? So it really begs the question. So if you got beef with affirmative action, how come you don't have it in every instance? How come it's only when it comes to black folks in education? You feel me? How come? I really want to know that shit. Like, why? You ain't got an issue with affirmative action with white folks in banking or government or school or housing. But hey, black people getting in schools, at the schools, man. To me, it's almost giving like, you Negroes used to be criminalized for being literate. How dare you try to get access to higher education? How dare you try to get access to higher education? Like literally the punishment for reading was death. You gonna tell me there's still not a criminality tied to the way black people are able to enlighten ourselves? I'm gonna argue right now. Listen, man. America from the jump all the way to now has always had beef with black people understanding who we are, how we are, and what the world is. The master didn't want you to pick up no book, and the GOP didn't want you to pick up no books either. You see what I'm saying? Stop being woke. Hey, that's the equivalence to me of Massa grabbing the Bible and it's pulling out the books he don't want you to read. I don't want you to read shit about no Hebrews. I don't want you to read shit about no Moses breaking the Pharaoh. I don't want you to get no crazy ideas, Negro. Be obedient to your master. Everything happens for a reason, you know? And the people that would last will one day come first. You should be obedient to your worldly master. And the reason why you in this position is because you broke a covenant with God. See, if your people wouldn't have broke a covenant with God, then I wouldn't be in this position. So if you want to make it to heaven, you gotta listen to me. We gonna leave that part in there. You see what I'm saying? But when it comes to Moses being an activist, saying let my people go, rip. We don't want to hear that shit, nigga. Rip. So you gonna tell me that censorship and black people learning is not a core part of America? You gonna tell me that? You gonna tell me that? Or are you gonna try to convince me that the way in which black people get to get education is not always already stigmatized? So when they say stop woke or go woke, go broke, you don't think that the same thing is telling an enslaved person, you go woke, some bones gonna go broke. They ain't the same thing. They ain't the same thing. So if I say education is elevation, and you got literal people that got beef with me for saying education is elevation, what they mad at? What they mad at? Hey, man, it used to be 2% of black people would be at Harvard. 2% of black people would be Yale. Now it's like 10. And they feel like, man, you know, Harvard's and Yale and Dartmouth and all the other schools, you know, Penn, they used to be like 98% white. Now they're only like 50 or 60. This is obviously discrimination. And then from a policy standpoint, really, y'all don't think HBCUs has any implications in the way in which admissions is the way that the Supreme Court was able to talk about race-based admissions? Y'all don't think it's going to have any impact on historically black universities that were literally structured uniquely for black admissions? Y'all don't think there's going to be a relationship between those two? So the same policy-making system that funds these D1 top white universities that want to go steal all the talent for athletics from the black community, but want to make it hard for their brothers, sisters, cousins to get in, y'all don't think it's going to have an impact to it? So like when the NIL deals came out and we all was for the culture and we was at Jackson State for Coach Prime, and then Coach Prime was able to jump ship and go to Colorado, y'all don't think that like the way in which policy, resources, and access is tied to schools, you don't think it had like a, excuse me, I think it's a relationship there. You know what I'm saying? I think the relationship is there. You know. Hey, shout out to you, I'm saying, what's that? Obama, you feel me? We just, to me, this is what it looked like to be a victor. You know what I'm saying? I done put some moisturizer, you know what I mean? This is what it like to be a victor, you feel me? And listen though, people in the comment section, we shouldn't hold it against the well-intentioned conservative whites that don't understand the difference between a victim and a victor. See what I'm saying? They don't understand, you know? They've been indoctrinated to believe that fighting against quartering soldiers was victorious. You know? So you can't blame them for that. You see what I'm saying? You can't blame them for that. They've been taught that being victorious is crying and whining on a piece of paper and complaining to King George about what he doing. See what I'm saying? That's victorious for them, you know? And regardless of the victimization they were doing, they feel like that victory had a lot of value and weight over everything else. So I'm going to argue that the way they've been indoctrinated, they already got a fucked up way of understanding victory and victimization or survivability and thriving. You see what I'm saying? Because an individual right now say, hey, man, if I say capitalism is bad, a person might say, hey, man, I think you're being a hypocrite because how can you criticize capitalism while participating in capitalism? To me, it sounds like How dare you say slavery is bad and then you still survive in slavery? How can you say the plantation is bad and you still participate on the plantation? Education is so powerful that it allows you to understand the way the world works. It gives you language to speak to the way the world works. It gives you understanding and context, not only historically, but also being able to understand how things currently or contemporarily work, right? And it's easier to persuade dumb people. It's easier to get individuals that are less knowledgeable to act on some shit because they don't know no better. I think that's the reason why a lot of no way black progression has always been met with white backlash. If we being real, black people only make up 15% of emissions at Harvard. So that tells me that you believe that's 15% too much, huh? The same folks that say, stay out the past, are the same people that's trying to politically push us into the past with policy. Say it ain't so. I know a lot of folks is pointing out, well, affirmative action really don't mean anything to us black people because it was white women that benefited the most. Hey, peep game. This little culture war that the Republicans is waging is way deeper than the optics you believe in this little speaking point you got going on, right? Whether we talking about CRT or black history and now this emissions, we recognize that there is a literal assault on the way in which black people are represented in politics in this country and in the classroom uniquely. The Supreme Court compared affirmative action increasing diversity to segregation against white people. See, now some people will say these are apples and oranges, but at least those two things is fruit. This comparing a tricycle with an apple. The only thing they got in common, they both red. For the people in the back, especially my fellow black folks, no matter how ineffective you believe the affirmative action was for our community, this is a W for Republicans in their win book, and especially when it comes to these little battles they waging in the culture wars. In research over me search, we can recognize, statistically speaking, when states did away with affirmative action in their emissions, we see that underrepresented populations was exactly that, more underrepresented.